But as the years went by, and I started going back to the reservation. Now I'm back, so I'm in Alaska, now I'm in Oregon. So my wife and I got married in 76, moved to Oregon in 81, and I lived there for a while. So then going back to the reservation, my aunties and uncles, some of them had died, and so I was going to do some funerals for my relatives. And so as I started to go back and reconnect with all of that, something began to stir in my own soul again in terms of who God created me to be. And so God didn't create me to be that. And because I'm a Jesus follower now, and this cultural way wants to conform me to that in the name of being a Christian, I started to question all of that. And so now in the last 10, 15 years, it's been a journey of sort of rediscovery, breaking away from sort of a colonial mindset, if you will, about what it means to follow Jesus. But it hasn't been an easy one, because American Christianity is very embedded with ideas about what it means to be Christian. Cultural notions of music, of art, of language, of ritual, of ceremony. And for all those years, indigenous stuff, not just here in North America, but I have many Maori friends in New Zealand, Aotearoa, who are learning to live out their faith in a Maori way. I have lots of Aboriginal friends in Australia, and indigenous communities all over the world who are trying to figure out what is post-colonial faith in Jesus going to look like for future generations as we break away from the ideas that you can't be native and follow Jesus. You have to choose. And so many of the people my parents' age were forced to choose, and the churches used the Bible to assimilate them really into a cultural model which had nothing to do with following Jesus. And so if you think about it, according to the biblical record, the Creator came to the earth in the form of a human being. It says in John chapter 1 in verse 10 that the Word, the living Word, became flesh. And in the Message version it says, and He moved into the neighborhood. God moved into the hood, humanity. So He moved into this little Indian village called Bethlehem, in this part of the world called Palestine or Asia Minor. And so Creator came to the earth as a two-legged, black hair, black eyes, very dark skin, this Aboriginal boy in this Indian village of a tribe of people called the Hebrews and a sub-tribe called the tribe of Judah. And so in the very beginnings of the story of faith in Jesus, it has its roots in an Aboriginal cultural context. And so followers of Jesus all came out of that cultural context. And if we could go back a couple thousand years ago, followers of Jesus behaved in ways much different than American followers of Jesus. Now, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that stories have to evolve if they're going to be true to themselves. So a few of us, a number of years ago, First Nations guys and gals, we decided that theology needed to be rescued from colonial thinking. And so we all went to get PhDs. So I'm finishing up a doctorate in cultural anthropology, primal and folk religion, and the history of Christian mission. I have some other homies who are doing PhDs in intercultural studies at different schools around the country. So we figured if we could become smarty pants Indians and get these pieces of paper that validate our opinions in the world of the academy, perhaps then we could begin to deconstruct some of the assumptions about what education is. So now we're doing our deconstruction piece in terms of how we learn, the ways we teach. Western education is not very compatible with indigenous learning styles. So critiquing pedagogy and andragogy and epistemology and all the other philosophical constructs behind why we teach the way we teach, why we use books and education and all that stuff works. And so I appreciate and applaud you for your work here at the school and the things that you're applying yourselves to. I think education's a good thing. And so all of our boys are, except for the 12, the one that's getting his high school degree. We're going to get him through high school. So, son, you might be the oldest high school graduate in America. So like this boy's name is Daniel. Daniel is brilliant. He is the most widely read kid, and he's brilliant as a poet, as a writer, as the philosopher, thinker, but he doesn't do that linear ink on a page thing at all. So we're trying to say, well, if you're going to do the ink on the page, do it creatively in a way that makes sense to how your brain is wired. And so the whole world of indigenous education globally are having to really examine, is this Western Greek model of Western education, is that the best way to educate our people in terms of Aboriginal indigenous communities? And we're saying, no, it isn't. So in this whole educational component, the deconstruction. So those are a few of us hanging out in the world of theology, saying if theology has been captured by the colonialists, then can it ever be reflective of an indigenous worldview, value, ceremony, and ritual that are no less biblical than how they do it? But if they say, whoever wins the wars gets to write the history books, well, theology is kind of the same way. So we got the Martin Luthers of the world and the John Calvins and the Zwinglies and modern American theologians who interpret the Bible out of their own colonial framework, and then the conclusions that they come to say, this is what Christianity looks like. This is what it looks like musically. This is what it looks like clothing-wise. This is what it looks like ecclesiologically in terms of how we do leadership in churches. And we're saying, no way, Jose. That's good for you, and it's culturally appropriate, but don't make it universally true. So all these notions about learning, universalism versus particularism, the idea that certain things are universally true, like I need to love my kids, I need to respect who they are, I need to train. So that's universally true whether you live in the jungle or on the mountain or speak Russian or German or Maori or Lakota. But then there are particular things. You don't speak Lakota to Japanese people, or you don't speak German to Irish people. So there are things that are particular to cultures, and people working out their faith stories, there's universal and particular. But in the colonial model, everything was universalized and said this is how everybody should be. So you Indian people, you need to stop being Indian and be German or European or Norwegian. I guess that was the status quo in North Dakota. And become a good North Dakota Lutheran and all of that stuff. And so every people group is unique and particular,